Hello, and welcome to Introduction to American Sign Language. This DVD was developed for people who are learning American Sign Language, or ASL. Did you know that American Sign Language is a real language able to convey complicated and abstract concepts? Many people believe that sign language uses English words, giving each word a sign. This is not true. ASL has no code taken from English. It is a full language, including its own grammatical features, syntax, and other rules. ASL is a visual gestural language that incorporates the use of body movements and facial expressions. In fact, ASL communication is conveyed only 30% through the hands and body. The remaining 70% is conveyed through facial expressions. For this reason, facial expressions are key for ASL grammar. While you are learning ASL, remember that, like any language, it is impossible to learn overnight. Also, just like any spoken language, like French, Spanish, or Greek, ASL is not a universal language. ASL is used primarily in Canada and the United States. Other countries have their own sign language. For example, British Sign Language and French Sign Language. Did you know that in Canada we have 3 different sign languages? There's American Sign Language, Langue de Signes Québécois, and Maritime Sign Language. On this DVD, we're just going to focus on ASL. As you are learning ASL, you may notice some differences depending on your sources. This can be equated to a sign language accent. You may notice differences between American-based and Canadian-based signs, and in some cases, signs used in different provinces or even cities. This is because ASL has grown and developed over the years within different communities. As you are learning ASL, the best thing that I can suggest is that you get out and meet the people in your community to see what signs are common for your area. Because ASL is its own language and so different from English, trying to incorporate the two can lead to many problems. Relying on spoken English and using your voice in the classroom will only hinder your learning. This is why your instructor will ask you that you do not use your voice during class. The best way for you to learn is to participate and interact. When asking for a sign, try not to resort to English by fingerspelling or writing out the word. Instead, use gestures or point to objects in your environment. Your instructor will then teach you the sign you are asking for. It is wonderful that you are now learning ASL. If you are in a classroom, this is a fantastic way to learn. One of the best ways to see your skills grow is to participate in the deaf community. Socialize and meet new people. You can find information on the internet for local deaf agencies, sporting events, and clubs. I encourage you to get involved and meet as many deaf community members as you can. If you do this, you will see your signing skills thrive. You might be surprised to learn that the deaf community has a rich and beautiful culture. This culture is not limited to language, but includes history, shared values, poetry, stories, traditions, and artifacts. For example, icons such as the I love you sign on pins, or clocks with hand-shaped numbers. Examples of ASL literature can be found in our A to Z hand-shaped stories. There are many books and videos you can find on these subjects. Contact your local deaf agency to see if they have a lending library you can use. This is a great way to see ASL literature and learn about deaf culture. You can even find many great resources online. In deaf culture, there are accepted norms of behavior that can be a bit of a culture shock for hearing people coming into the community. Attention getters, for example. Hearing people need only to call out the name of the person they are trying to get the attention of. Not being able to hear, deaf people use other methods, waving, a tap on the shoulder, pounding on a table or floor, or flicking the lights on and off. Keep in mind, however, that flickering the lights too fast would indicate an emergency. These types of attention-getting behaviors might seem rude to a hearing person, but in the deaf community it is very common and acceptable. There can also be many misunderstandings between deaf and hearing cultures. For example, it is very common in the deaf community for people to be very direct with their statements. For hearing individuals who are not used to this kind of openness, it may seem very rude. While signing, there are some common behaviors deaf people will use, such as crinkling their nose. This is used as a way of agreeing with what someone is saying. Hearing people may see this and think that the deaf person is distracted by a smell, or insinuating that they smell bad. In truth, nose crinkling is simply the deaf way of conveying that they agree with what you are saying. This type of expressive feedback while engaging in a conversation is an important part of deaf culture. There are many common miscommunications between deaf and hearing individuals. When two deaf individuals are conversing, they maintain eye contact and keep the conversation flowing. Often, hearing individuals will sign with little or no facial expressions. For a deaf person, this lack of expression means a loss of connection. Hearing people are often uncomfortable with keeping eye contact, something that is critical for connection and understanding. Being engaged and expressive is an important part of the culture and the language. Technology has come a long way in recent years. For example, deaf have access to flashing lights as visual alarms for such things as the fire alarm, doorbells, ringing phones, and baby monitors. We also have visual alarms to wake us up in the morning. There are vibrating alarms that can be used under a mattress or pillow. We have TTY devices that connect to a regular phone system. by connecting the device directly to the phone line. When typing on a TTY, the characters appear on the screen above the keyboard, and a person using a TTY on the other phone will also see the text as well, allowing for back and forth conversation. If a hearing individual has no TTY to contact someone who is deaf, they can access the Bell Relay service to act as a real-time facilitator. The BRS operator will read the typed messages to the hearing party and type spoken messages to the deaf party. This is a great service used by the deaf community. As technology advances, we are making the transition to newer devices. The BlackBerry, for example, is very popular in the deaf community. It's a handy device to be able to send quick messages. Emails are another great way to keep in touch. Technology is certainly changing fast. If you're interested in learning more about deaf culture, contact your local deaf club. There are many events hosted by deaf clubs and are very welcoming of hearing participants. There are a lot of terms out there to identify people with a hearing loss. Deaf, hard of hearing, hearing impaired. Which is the best to use? First, let's have a look at what these terms mean. The word deaf can be used to describe someone with little to no hearing. Someone who is deaf may still be able to hear some sounds, sometimes with the use of a hearing aid. There may even be specific frequencies that a person can hear, such as high or low tones, depending on their hearing loss. A person who identifies themselves as being culturally deaf will be a person who uses sign language and who is involved in the deaf community. The term deaf is often used with pride by members of this community. In the past, the terms deaf-mute or deaf and dumb were used. As a point of respect to the deaf community, we ask that these terms be left in the past. The term hearing impaired is rarely used, as it is seen as a negative labeling of something that the deaf community feels is a part of who they are. Being deaf is not something that must be fixed. The terms deaf and hard of hearing are the best to use when referring to someone with a hearing loss. A hearing person who has gone through much of their life without a hearing loss, and then later, by sickness, accident, or from age, loses their hearing, is referred to as deafened. Now you know that ASL is a unique and complete language. We will now explore a little bit more about the linguistics of ASL. Fingerspelling is generally used for 5 reasons. 1. Proper names. 2. Brand names. 3. Titles, for example, books or movies. 4. Places. And 5. Loan signs. Loan signs are simply a sign that incorporates fingerspelling. For example, the sign for TV, OK, or bank. When you are fingerspelling, try to keep your hand steady and the transitions between letters smooth. Moving your hand around or bouncing it can make it difficult to read. Practice your fingerspelling and try to make it smooth rather than letter by letter. Remember that fingerspelling is not a substitute for sign language. If you do not know a sign, try to gesture or use items in your environment to convey your message. There are 26 letters in the English alphabet that are used to make words. In ASL, we have hand shapes that we use to form signs. Including the 26 hand shapes that represent the letters of the alphabet, there are a total of 140 hand shapes in ASL. Of course, a hand shape on its own cannot create a sign. Signs are created using 4 parameters: 1. Hand shape, 2. Location, 3. Movement, and 4. Palm orientation. Let's look at a few examples. Here is the sign for girl. This is the hand shape. The location is on the cheek. The movement is down. Palm orientation is to the side with the palm toward the signer. Another sign is ant. This is the hand shape. The location is on the cheek. The movement is down. Let's compare the parameters for these 2 signs. The hand shapes are different as well as the palm orientation. Changing these 2 parameters changes the meaning of the sign. Let's look at another example. This is the sign for please. This is the hand shape. The location is on the chest. The movement is circular. The palm orientation is towards the signer. Another sign is sorry. This is the hand shape. The location is on the chest and the movement is circular. Palm orientation is towards the signer. Again, you'll notice that 3 out of 4 parameters are the same. Just by changing the hand shape, you change the meaning of the sign. Now that you've seen a few examples of single signs, let's have a look at a few ASL sentences. ASL is very different from English, and the word order can seem a bit confusing. Here we will go over some very basic syntax rules. When signing a sentence in ASL, we generally use the order of object, subject, verb. Let's have a look at an English sentence. In this sentence, the object would be the store. The subject is the boy. And the verb is going. So, if we were to sign the sentence in ASL, it would look like this. Store, boy, go. You may have noticed that I didn't sign the words the, is, or to. In ASL, these words are not needed. Let's try another example. Here is the English sentence. In ASL, it would be chocolate, girl, eat. Another way to look at ASL syntax is to think of it in a topic-comment structure. For a sentence such as, I like coffee, the topic is coffee, and the comment is, I like. So in ASL, the sentence would be, coffee I like. Or how about the sentence, I have a big dog? In ASL, it would be, dog big, I have. These are only a few examples of ASL sentences. Although you may be feeling overwhelmed right now, do not worry about mastering ASL syntax immediately. This will take time, and you can pick it up best by attending classes regularly and by attending deaf social events. The more you immerse yourself in ASL, the quicker you will acquire the syntax naturally. Classifiers are a unique and important part of ASL. They can be used to describe an object or a person, how they move, where they are located, or what they look like. Let's have a look at a few examples. One common classifier is using the 3 hand shape to represent a car. With this hand shape, I can show cars parked in a row side by side or front to back. I can even show a car parallel parking. Another example is with the C hand shape. With this, I can show a cup on a table. I can position the cup in the center of the table, on the end, or even underneath. With this hand shape, I can show different movements of feet, tapping one foot, walking on tiptoes, walking normally, or even clicking heels together. There are so many ways to use classifiers, and although there are structural rules to follow, the best way to learn is through exposure. I would like to discuss the subject of interpreters. As you start to learn ASL, possibly through a college program, you may think that after a 14-week course, you are ready to become an ASL interpreter. I want to explain that this course does not qualify you as an interpreter. If you are interested in becoming an interpreter, I encourage you to enroll in an ASL interpreter program. In Ontario, this program can be found at George Brown College in Toronto. This is a 3-year training program. Across Canada, there are several colleges and universities that offer an ASL interpreter training program. Most will be either a 2- or 3-year program. To be a qualified ASL interpreter, you will require certification from one of these programs. Deaf individuals have the right to interpreters to access services such as training and education at colleges and universities, job interviews, various community services, and weddings. In situations such as doctor's appointments where information can be complicated, having an interpreter is a must. The same would apply for legal discussions. An interpreter must be provided to ensure that all communication is clear. Interpreters work within a strict code of ethics. The interpreter must remain neutral at all times while relaying information back and forth between parties. As well, after leaving an assignment, an interpreter must keep all information confidential. To book an interpreter, you would contact an agency that provides that service. You will need to provide them with the date, time, and location of the assignment. Normally, you will need to request an interpreter at least 2 or 3 weeks prior to the assignment for a better chance of availability. Deaf individuals do not require the use of interpreters every day, as we are very independent. For example, it would not be necessary to have an interpreter to go to McDonald's. Gesturing, pointing, and writing back and forth works just fine. Today, deaf people are very independent and only require the use of interpreters in situations that require a lot of complex communication, such as large meetings. When required, an interpreter will be brought in. It is the interpreter's role to facilitate communication by signing all spoken messages and voicing all signed messages. Remember, learning this language does not qualify you as an interpreter. If this is something you want to pursue, I encourage you to learn ASL in class and socialize within the deaf community. Once you are fairly fluent in ASL, you will then be ready to start in an interpreter program.